Good afternoon and welcome to our second webinar from the PMO 101 Summer School. My name is Eileen Roden and I, with my colleague Simon George, will be taking you through today's session. For those of you who didn't join us last time, we're going to do a quick recap, but most of the information, or all of the information in relating to the last one, which was held on the 21st of June, which talked about project and programme officers, is available on the APM website and also on the APM YouTube channel. Without any further ado, let me just introduce myself and my colleague. I'm here with Simon George. If I just let Simon introduce himself first.
Hi everybody, my name's Simon George. I've been working in around programme offices now for close on 30 years, 34 years. Having set one up first in the early 1990s. I've been a project and programme manager as well, and certainly over the last 10-15 years I've become a very vocal advocate in where I've been working to push PMOs as a career for people. You know, people look at being project managers and programme managers, but I think it can be a very satisfying and rewarding experience to actually be working in a PMO, and you have to be a very sort of rounded individual, I mean, in terms of the skill set, rather than being very focused on delivery. So certainly I'm a big advocate of PMO as a career.
Thank you, Simon. So, as I said, my name is Eileen Roden. I'm currently, like Simon, one of the members of the committee. And again, similar to Simon, I've worked in and around PMOs for probably not quite as long as Simon, but I'm planning to get there in that many years yet. So we both volunteer, we both have day jobs, but we volunteer on the PMO SIG committee, and as Simon said, to really kind of support the community of other people who work in and around PMOs. The purpose of today's webinar then is really another introductory session, go back and really understand the basics around PMOs, what PMOs are. And as we said, we very often get asked what the P stands for in PMO, and it can mean a multiple of things, and we're going to concentrate this week particularly in the programme and portfolio P's in the PMO. We're going to have a look at the structure of those PMOs, what roles typically sit within those offices, and the activities that they undertake within the organisation. We'll also just kind of quickly touch on some of those challenges which will come up as we go through that session. And both Simon and I, as we've said, have got experience of working in PMO, so we've picked out a couple of examples that kind of demonstrate the types of officers that we're going to be talking about today. We talked about what a PMO actually is, and we picked up two definitions. One is Mark Mullally's definition, which is a mechanism used to address common project management issues in an organisation. And it really there is about to support and facilitate project success. So the interesting thing about that, it's not just about projects, it's actually about project success. And the PTO Best Management Practice says it has two key rules. One is to enable decisions to be made for people who have accountability for the delivery and oversight of those projects, but also it's about supporting the business, supporting business models, it's about supporting the delivery of projects and programs. So again, similar to Mark's definition. So effectively your PMO, whatever level it is in the organisation, is going to be focused on making sure the decisions around projects and programs and the delivery of those projects and programs and the whole change portfolio of the organisation is done to best effect. So we're there to kind of provide that stable framework that is there to improve the probability of success, and it ranges in a whole range of activities, from setting up governance structures and methods, supporting, as I said, those people who make decisions around projects at an executive level, but also at the delivery team level. And we're also there in some capacity just to kind of measure and ensure that we're doing that in the most effective and efficient way possible. The type of PMO you see in organisations, hopefully, is absolutely focused on solving the issues and the problems that you have within your particular organisation. Very rare to see kind of two PMOs that do exactly the same thing. We'll come, as we go through today's webinar, you'll see that we'll talk about the types of things that they do. We won't talk about kind of detailed activities and how they're undertaken. That's tailored for your organisation. But if the PMO is actually going to add value to the organisation, it really needs to have a mission or a kind of a purpose that's easily understood. It needs to make sure that what it does actually delivers, not just some little kind of projects on the outskirts of the kind of the main bearing of the organisation, but looking after those projects that contribute to strategy. And it should have some kind of key objectives that align to the SMART acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And as we've said, the P can stand for project, programme, or portfolio. Yesterday, the last session, we looked at project and programme officers, and today we're going to look at programme and portfolio officers. The subtle difference was the PMOs we looked at in the last session were temporary officers, so those officers that were set up to support an individual project or programme just for the duration of the relevant project or programme. The two we're going to cover off today at both programme and portfolio office are going to be those that are permanent within the organisation. But as we finished off last time, we did say that a temporary programme office actually could become a permanent programme office. So that's where our focus is going to be today. And I'm going to hand over to Simon, who's going to talk about the 9-box model briefly before talking about the first set of officers.
Thanks, Eileen. I introduced this 9-box model in the last webinar. It's quite straightforward, although you may not think so. What you're seeing here is the temporary PMOs, which we used as examples for in the last webinar, and then the top 6 boxes are the departmental and corporate permanent offices. So generally, a PMO will exist in one or more of these boxes. In fact, in an organisation, you may have several PMOs who will do some of these things or some of all of these things. So every firm changes, varies rather, and in general, it's useful to see where you fit as a PMO individual and your office into this model, so you can see how you have to relate to those above and below you. The focus quickly is that those to the left of the model are offices that don't have direct control over the project managers. They're supporting a delivery arm who themselves recruit PMs and program managers. Those in the middle often have what we call strategic PMs, in other words, people who are doing maybe the high profile programs. Or sometimes, as I'll show you in an example later, they may be the change managers, in other words, to manage change rather than just delivery. And then you've got those offices on the right here, which are very focused on managing all the PM community and all the projects they're running. So, I mean, what this is basically telling us is there are the temporary offices in the bottom, which often change into permanent offices as time goes on. Y2K back in, so obviously just before 2000, over 2000, was a prime example of this. It was often the first time that companies actually set a PMO up to do the Y2K, and that's what I was involved in. And what then happened is that they thought, this is a great thing. They could do with more of this, that PMO structure that controlled the Y2K and the projects around it worked really well. So we'll keep it as a permanent structure and move it into the mainstream of our organization. So it's often cited as one of the key drivers that why PMOs have existed since and have become, in effect, more pertinent, to businesses across everywhere. So today, as I say, we're talking about the enterprise-wide and departmental levels, the permanent offices. So what we're just covering here quickly is the P3O view of PMOs. This is showing a hierarchical structure. Now, this doesn't have to be physical line management, but often what you'll find is that you'll have an organizational portfolio office, in other words, something that is overseeing all of the programs and projects in an organization. Now, very large organizations in fact could have multiples of these even, but in most cases it's a single portfolio office. It's interested in the really high profile big stuff, but also making sure that it just understands what the rest of the company is doing so that it's not going to cause problems. Beneath that you've got hub portfolio or program offices. So these are again often in departments, as we showed from the previous model. So these are permanent organizations looking at specific areas of the business. So it might be construction, or it might be, in my case, IT. So they will often have their own portfolio management and project management processes, but they're working in a dotted way to an organizational portfolio office. At the bottom, we come back to the temporary PMOs, which are set up for the life of a project or program and purely to support those. On the right of the diagram, it's showing basically a center of excellence. This is often a separate unit or function, and although it can be part of the portfolio office, and it's all about making the organization work consistently. It's putting together methods and standards, it's putting together competency, skills, and the team to achieve those. It's certainly delivering some assurance that people are following the methods and standards and doing the right things. And it's usually the point where knowledge management, lessons learned for instance, is concentrated. In other words, you want lessons learned to be available to the whole organization, not to be siloed. So this is a typical model of how an organization can exist. These are the three items that we're sort of picking examples around today. One is the Centre of Excellence, which I'll talk through, and following on with a permanent program office, and then Eileen is going to pick up following that with about the strategic portfolio office. Let's just discuss about Centre of Excellence. As I said, it doesn't necessarily need to be a standalone, and it could sit within the strategic portfolio office, and it often will exist at a lower level. So there might be several centres of excellence. It might exist in what I would call a specialist program office. For instance, my team contains a centre of excellence, but I'm within the IT area because it's actually quite specialised, and we have different ways of doing things than the construction industry. There's a thing about centre of excellence that there is a problem in having it as a standalone group. It can become an ivory tower. And if they do that, it can quickly lose the backing of senior management as it actually starts to fail to reflect reality and is being challenged by those hub portfolio offices and program offices beneath it, because what it's trying to deliver is perfection and not being able to help support the business in delivering efficiently. So often the Centre of Excellence is better sitting inside the portfolio office and being a bit closer to the operational area, just because that keeps them centred in reality.
Just to say, I was at a conference the other week from a PMO perspective, and somebody said to me, really interesting around the Centre of Excellence, is that one of their challenges is that they call themselves the Centre of Excellence as an aspirational statement rather than a statement of fact. And that also causes them some issues. So if you're going to call yourself a Centre of Excellence, you actually need to be a Centre of Excellence.
Absolutely. And one way that a Centre of Excellence, in a sense, can mitigate that issue is by corralling the excellence within an organisation rather than having it all actually in the Centre of Excellence. So I like to go back to the idea, which was the old quality management term, was natural work teams. You've got people throughout a business who are usually excellent at doing what they do, whether that be risk planning, project and program management, controls, the use of tools like Microsoft Project or obviously enterprise portfolio tools, and they don't always need to exist in the Centre of Excellence. What the Centre of Excellence, though, needs to do is ensure that those people are talking together, agreeing how the business can deliver efficiently, but using some of this best practice. And then the Centre of Excellence itself becomes a conduit of putting that excellence back out for people to use. So rather than concentrating people in the centre, I think quite often it becomes more of a facilitation. You do still need people who understand what they're talking about, but it can work very well where you've just got people from around the business who are facilitated by the Centre of Excellence to build the methods and standards, the templates, and and generally just sort of assure that reality is brought to bear on what could be just sort of straight out of a book. So those sort of subject matter experts would discuss things like local concessions to the corporate methods. So certainly in IT we have certain documentation, certain ways of working, certain tools which are different to the rest of the business. So we discuss with the Centre of Excellence about the use of these things and how they would be used so that they can feel assured that we're not breaking anything. But also in some cases they go, oh, we hadn't even thought about that, using that tool, doing it that way. Oh, we could incorporate that. So it's really useful to do this stuff. And what you do, of course, is you get more buy-in from the rest of the business when they see they're being listened to. So that, again, it's getting away from this ivory tower. If all you do is put white papers out, if all you do is put a methodology out there and let people sort of live with it, you lose support so quickly. It's unbelievable. You've got to be there and being with those people and supporting them. So if we move on, let's just have a look at what the Centre of Excellence is about. The reporting line, the direct reporting line is often into a head of delivery, or it could be obviously into the head of a permanent programme or portfolio office where you've decided to actually incorporate it within that structure. Right, so what do you have in a Centre of Excellence? Well, funnily enough, you've still got a PMO manager, and you've probably got, we've got the analyst specialist role, but here probably the PMO specialist stroke analyst role. You're more likely to get specialists in the Centre of Excellence here. This is why, they're the SMEs in a lot of cases, and they're probably more senior and more experienced than you might get in what I call the sort of divisional, departmental PMOs. The PMO manager, however, at this level doesn't need to be one of those subject matter experts. In fact, it probably makes sense for them to be a people person, because they've got to, in effect, make sure that everybody understands what they're trying to do, how they're going to be doing it. The meet and greet friendly person that everybody wants to talk to, rather than somebody who actually is probably going to spout jargon all the time. So it's really useful actually having a manager a PMO manager in the Centre of Excellence that isn't a PMO manager. I mean, if that makes sense. So these resources working in the Centre of Excellence, most of them are internal specialists. They will work across the whole organisation. They won't be contractors in the main. These are people who are part of the business, understand the business, but work across it. And what you will also corral into the Centre of Excellence are virtual resources that sit within other functional areas. So you'll have people who are experts in finance, people who are experts in procurement, and in our case, people who are experts in the IT and therefore the tool support for the business, who aren't part of the Centre of Excellence per se, but in effect are corralled into the Centre of Excellence and are used as part of this pool of excellence. What are the key activities of a Centre of Excellence? Well, we've got obviously the development, maintenance and implementation of the PPM standards, methods, processes and systems. And we are talking about here development. It's not picking up it from somewhere else. It's developing something that is fit for the business that it's going to operate in. So it may be going back to Prince2 and MSP and Gates processes and things like that. However, it will develop it in such a way that it's fit for purpose for the business it needs to operate in. And it will own this methods and standards. If, in other words, if other people want to have concessions against it, or they feel it needs to be modified, it's this centre of excellence that they have to go to get agreement to that. Obviously, what they might well be involved in is development, maintenance and implementation of a competency framework and the associated skills register. In other words, they may not manage PMs and program managers, however, they will be laying the rules down. This is the level of skill and competency we expect for the different levels. This is who we've got on the books that are available and when they're available to be doing some of our major projects. So they're going to control at the highest level the resources available. They may not own those resources, but they'll certainly know about them. They will certainly be part of strategy, the reporting strategy and the templates. In other words, senior management want to see consistency in the reporting. When they see somebody reporting a project out of IT, they want to see it being the same as somebody that's producing the report about a project running in another area. So they will develop the frequency of reporting, what elements are being reported, the milestones that the projects will be using to report, in order to give a consolidated but consistent view to senior management so they can make decisions on whether things are going well or not. If people just produce reports in different ways, at different levels, different detail, then it makes life very difficult for people who have to make decisions to know whether something is just being a bit pedantic about saying something's not quite right, or whether there is something seriously wrong. Another thing a Centre of Excellence will pretty obviously do, given they've got the subject matter expertise, is consultancy. You have to expect that certainly PMOs in some areas of the business will be quite naive. They will just have a few PMO analysts who will be reporting on progress, but they need to be skilled up, and therefore you would bring in your SMEs from the Centre of Excellence in order to do something like that. And this involves obviously training. They may lay on training courses. Certainly though, the Centre of Excellence would be involved with assurance, not against everything. The assurance almost certainly would be being done by the departments themselves within the programme offices. However, the big ticket stuff, the Centre of Excellence would almost certainly have a view of and would be getting involved with. So what are the key challenges? We've mentioned this before, but it's the accusations of being an ivory tower. In other words, the acceptance of the systems and processes that the Centre of Excellence is putting in place. This is why, rather than putting a group of people into the centre and say, deliver me a method and put it out there, put the handbook out and let people use it, they need to be and get the buy-in from the people in the business who are going to be using these processes. And this is where, when they're building their systems, they need to corral that subject matter expertise in from across a business in order to make sure what they build is fit for purpose and can be used. And another thing is, they've got to be enough of them. They've got to be able to have sufficient support to the business needs of the. In other words, if we've got PMOs in the rest of the business who are fairly junior, there's going to be a lot of consultancy and training needs, and this Centre of Excellence has to be able to deliver. It can't just say, oh well, I am the risk man, I put out a white paper and I let people have to just deal with it. You know, it's like, well actually I run training courses, I'm there 24/7. I mean, that's probably a bit over the top, but you know, I'm there whenever somebody needs some consultancy in how to do something or how to manage and mitigate a risk. So one of the things the Centre of Excellence has to look at is how it's going to resource itself and the level of capability it needs within itself to provide this. I mean, does it need its own training team, or can it outsource that? So there's some key challenges to being a Centre of Excellence. It is a PMO in its own right, but just a bit divorced from the operational areas. Okay, we've dealt with the Centre of Excellence. This often lives inside a permanent program office. So this is where, we mentioned a bit earlier, you can have gained a permanent program office having had a temporary one supporting a major program at some point. And then as the program comes to an end, somebody somewhere says, well, that was a really good thing to be having. Let's turn it into a program office because we've got other things we want to do. A pure program office will focus on ensuring delivery using methods and standards handed down from the Centre of Excellence. And this is where it makes sense to incorporate the COE into the program office, because it allows the Centre of Excellence to actually be close to the delivery teams and to see firsthand where maybe what looked good on paper isn't quite working out in reality and is in fact causing blockages and slow delivery. And what also you might do though is, if you've got a separate Centre of Excellence, what you might do though is have a local Centre of Excellence within your program office. In other words, you've got your head of risk perhaps in the Centre of Excellence, but you would have senior risk managers in the permanent program offices, because they're going to be looking at the specific risks associated with their areas and permeating up the highest risks, strategic risks, back up through the Centre of Excellence. Similarly to the last one, we've got, well, who do they report to? Well, the permanent program office reports into a department or division within which it exists. That's quite straightforward. That is what it's there to do. It's there to report on the programs and projects within that area. It hasn't got a reporting line outside. Now, that doesn't mean to say it doesn't talk to the Centre of Excellence or to other program offices. However, it is responsible for managing the projects and programs within the department which it exists. Right, so what do we have here? The roles again, a PMO manager. Somebody in this case in a program office is probably more likely to be a specialist in their own right, or multi-specialist, because they're closer to delivery area. They're not going to be handling what we call the board. They're going to be handling just the local senior management, and therefore they need to be a subject matter expert in quite a lot of areas. And they may be the specific SMEs in say risk. They're all planning. It depends obviously where they've come from. However, what they will almost certainly have working with them are PMO specialists. Again, people who work with those Centre of Excellence but are the local risk manager, the local planning manager, the local assurance manager, and they will have teams themselves of analysts working in areas. And this is where now we start getting PMO administrators, people who are supporting the PMO. So they're actually booking meetings, they're taking minutes, they're updating registers. They're people who perhaps are in the longer term going to move into an analyst role or even a specialist role eventually. However, they're fairly junior, and these are the sort of people that don't exist in a Centre of Excellence. So a permanent program office, most of the PMO resources will be permanent staff. You can't have people rolling in and out where you're trying to keep a consistency to what you're doing and a level of competency and skill, the specialisms. So in general, you're recruiting long-term permanent staff here. However, we're now looking at potentially you might have some internal secondments of people coming in from project management areas or even from other areas of the business who want to learn more about PMOs and work in this area, and they may be coming in as sort of what I call junior PMO analysts. You know, they've got a bit of skill with SQL Server, a bit of skill with Excel reporting, things that the PMO can use, and then obviously they may stay on and develop in the PMO or go back to where they were based originally. What will the program office be doing? Performance monitoring, that's its prime function. It's measuring how well things are doing so that the management can stop projects or put them on hold or sort issues out. So it's all about tracking them and being able to give concise and accurate information. Transition management, very clear that when now you're down at the program and project level, it's key to being in control of the transition from the project into business as usual. In other words, making sure that what you're putting and what's going in has been fully tested, is going to work in the business as usual areas. So it's very making sure that, you know, the warranty periods, if that's something you do, that the testing, the documentation is all in place. So it's making sure that transition happens from the project environment into the business as usual. What else will the program office be doing? Well, they'll be maintaining registers. These might well be coming down from above, so the standard templates, or they may be developing some local registers. They certainly will be developing and maintaining and supporting the project planning process. It's quite fundamental, obviously, to running projects and programs that you have plans, and within those milestones, and they're used for consistency of reporting. The program office will be looking at cross-project dependencies, making sure that obviously if a project is running late, what the impact of that might be on other projects that were dependent on it. They should also have a view of external dependencies, but they're more likely to be manifested as risks. Schedule and supporting of external reviews and assurance. Again, the Centre of Excellence is involved at the highest level with some reviews. They may even be calling in external reviewers to look at the high-profile programs and projects. The program office, however, will be supporting that, scheduling those and making sure the staff on those project programs are available when those reviews happen. So the program office is also involved in communication and reporting. Prime function is the reporting. The communication is more like success. You know, this is what we've delivered out of, you know, this period, this quarter. You know, I'll be doing well. And it's very hands-on, the program office. This is where if your project manager goes off sick or, you know, is not quite such an expert, that the program office goes in and helps. So it's very hands-on. So what are the key challenges of a program office? Well, potentially you could look at it that it's reporting to two masters. It's reporting to its own delivery arm, to the senior management in its division or department, who want things done their way. However, it is expected to also conform to the Centre of Excellence, the methods and standards of the organisation. And this can cause issues. So it's interesting that the person who manages the PMO here has to, which is why I'm saying that the manager here has to be quite an SME in their own right, because they have to fight the battle for their own PMO. Because the COE can say, you don't know what you're talking about, do it this way. And the PMO manager has to be able to turn around and say, well, no, I know how this should be being done. And in some cases, they have to say, you're wrong, and be able to fight that battle. Also, you have to be so careful that you don't take the corporate methodology and spend so much time tailoring it that it no longer works and conforms to the central methodology, but also that it doesn't create lots of additional extra work. In other words, use what you can without changing too much of it, but change what you need to. So it's very clear what you must understand what needs changing. Embedding lessons learned is a key feature of Program Office, so it's making sure that as programs and projects come to an end, that we understand what lessons have been learnt and be able to feed that back into local and central processes. Now this could mean corporate systems for lessons learnt, where you can pass this back into the rest of the business. And again, what the Program Office has got to be really careful about is becoming a silo in its own right. In other words, your Program Office could have its own way of doing things, its own methodology, not worried about what the corporate office is doing, and very soon everybody will going, well, if they can't be bothered to work to the standards of the rest of the business, I can't be bothered with them. So again, it's very clear that although they're a permanent office, they need to be part of the business and be communicating all the time. I've got a quick example here, which happens to be who I work for, which is Transport for London. And I'll put this out as the current way of working in an area of the business. We're going through some changes at the moment, so this might change. Historically, we've had a TfL PMO. It came out of Rail and Underground, the Capital Programs Directorate there, because they were the most mature part of the organisation and they had their own PMO. By default, it's sort of morphed into becoming the TfL PMO. It's a permanent office and it owns the corporate standards. And in fact, I used to own IT standards up until 3 or 4 years ago, and I made the conscious decision as part of the team putting the new ones in that we should move to the corporate standard, and I would be part of building that new one. In other areas of the business, now the methods and standards are there. They've just adopted them. So, for instance, what we call Surface, which is trams and buses and Emirates Airline, for instance, they have their own portfolio office. They have their own PMO supporting that, with their own PMO manager, their specialists and administrators. They're working, though, to the corporate methods that the TfL PMO, the Centre of Excellence, is putting out there. And in a lot of cases, without too much change. The big sort of box more to the right now is the current division, department that I'm operating in. I'm the IM Capabilities and Assurance team. I'm a PMO manager there. I have subject matter expert specialists and I've got some analysts as well and administrators. We have some other PMOs within the division though. We have what's known as TfL Online, who are they're the front end facing. If you've used any TfL websites to do your journey planning or wherever, they're the people who do it. And they have a small PMO to support them. And again, there's an area called customer experience. Now, if you phone up and have a whinge at TfL, you'll probably be going through the customer experience team. And again, they have a small PMO because they have systems that support that customer experience. So we have a multi-layered PMO experience, and you've got people who are more junior in the online and experience areas. We've got IM, which has had a PMO now for getting on for 10 years, and it's pretty mature. And we've got a Centre of Excellence externally, which has come in from a part of the business, who own the methods. But we very much use the working together way of operating, in that although they have some subject matter experts, what they do is they call upon the expertise in the rest of the business whenever changes need to be made, and we change the processes. So, and we might be going through a major change in the next sort of year or so. So it makes absolute sense that they keep those lines of communication open. It was just an example of how multi-tiered PMOs can exist in an organisation. And there are other PMOs across the business, but this is the area particularly I work in and how I relate to the central PMO. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through that last office that we haven't covered off, which is the portfolio office. And as Simon's already mentioned, you may have within your portfolio office, you may have your Centre of Excellence, and I've taken those out to one side. So we've already covered those off, so I'll not cover that off in the portfolio office. The other thing about a portfolio office, if you have a single office, single kind of PMO that covers all of the organisation, you may also have a programme office in your portfolio office. So you may have those activities that Simon's just talked about kind of looking at the delivery of each of the projects and programs in that part of the division or across the whole organisation. What I'm going to talk about around this kind of specific portfolio office is, or what I'm going to talk about in the conversation in this portfolio office, are those kind of specific activities that kind of set apart a permanent programme office to a portfolio office. And I suppose the biggest difference at a portfolio office comes to who the customers are at this level. And we're really talking about working for the senior executive, the C-suite, or the board of an organisation, where we're looking across the whole organisation to support not just the delivery of projects, but it's really about delivering support for the delivery of strategy and how those projects and programs deliver in at that strategic level. Now, it is worth mentioning just before we go on is that we may have in an organisation kind of that at the very top level. We often have portfolio levels that are split to support
kind of sub-portfolios. So you may have in your organisation portfolios that are split by division, whether that be a geographic division or a functional division. So you may have a portfolio across a geographic region. So in our work with Cadbury's, we had 3 geographic portfolio offices. We had one EMEA in the UK, one over Asia Pac, and one over in the Americas. So between the 3 of us, we covered everything, but we had specific kind of reporting lines and looked after kind of the sub-portfolios across the organisation. So in terms of a reporting line, what we really want to be doing is reporting into that portfolio director. So somebody who has oversight and accountability for delivery of all of the projects that are in that organisation. The interesting bit is, most likely, is that you will also have a conversation now with the business as usual people, because you're talking about not just what's happening in the delivery of projects, but what's happening after projects, what's the outcome, what's the impact it's actually having on the business. So that's your kind of reporting line. And we will have a kind of the portfolio manager will have, and I always find it interesting, this role called a portfolio analyst, who sounds kind of a pretty kind of junior position, but actually this portfolio analyst is quite senior in the organisation, because they can look across all of the outputs and the kind of the summary information for the projects and programmes. They can look across the pipeline of projects, and they can kind of be given advice and guidance and suggestions to the senior management team about what the implications are of the decisions that are currently being discussed or need to be made around that overall portfolio. And again, you will see under the kind of the PMO, if you have a program officer in there, you will have your analyst specialist and your administrator. The types of people who work in a portfolio office are usually, and I've put in there, permanent and trusted resources. And they tend to not just be P3M specialists or people who know about projects and programs. We would expect the people who are sitting there at a portfolio office to have a real understanding of business, how the business works, and understanding of the different functions. And as we'll see, have relationships with the senior executives. And Simon talked before about having this kind of career path for people in PMOs. Is quite an interesting one about it. There tends to be quite a big jump between having a program office and moving to a portfolio office, partly because of the credibility and the business knowledge that you need to take those roles. And I've also put in there, very often organisations take on a large kind of strategically one-off program. Now, as we talked in the first session, you may have a standalone program office to support that initiative, but very often you will get organisations get in a group of specialists or consultants to do the support for that at the kind of the strategic level for that program or project. In terms of the activities of the portfolio management office, it really is about kind of looking at what's the pick and mix of programs and projects that are undertaken. So very often we talk about something called multi-criteria analysis. So on what basis do we pick the projects and programs that we actually want to undertake? Now, in a PMO, as we've said, they're a decision-enabling body. We don't sit there at the portfolio office and decide on behalf of the executive. Well, I think of our list of projects, I think we should do the top 10 plus numbers 17, 21 and 26. What we may do is go back as a portfolio analysis, go into the senior exec team, and based on the analysis and the criteria that we've agreed, the results say top 10, 17, 21 and 26. But it is then up to the senior exec team to decide, based on kind of further conversation, about the ones that will actually go into be delivered in the next kind of program. So part of the role is about kind of supporting those decisions making, but also gathering together program and project information that kind of puts into that pipeline. And very often we'll see organisations will do that on an annual basis, and sometimes that's supplemented by additional projects and programs that come up throughout the year. And because we've got we get involved in that kind of pipeline, very often we work with the the project and program sponsors to help put together that high-level scoping to make sure there's no overlap with other projects and programs that are currently underway or planned. So when we talk about this cross-project and program dependencies, it's very often before we're into delivery rather than when we're down in the delivery road that's looked after by the program office. Very much involved in terms of capacity planning. So Simon talked about at a program office level, understanding the skills and capabilities of each of the people who are in the delivery on how many we've got, and they were very much interested in terms of allocation of individuals at project level. At this capacity planning level, we're really looking at two things. One is about have we got the skills and capability to actually undertake the projects in the pipeline or the ones that we've selected for this year's portfolio. But we're also talking about have we got the right types of people. So we may not necessarily go down to detailed skills and named individuals, but we will want to be thinking about, well, actually, have we got sufficient project managers who manage digital projects? Have we got enough individuals who've got specialist knowledge in our manufacturing systems, because we've got lots of projects in those areas. So it's really at a capacity level. But it will also be looking at the business's ability to absorb the changes that are going to come from those projects and programs. We'll need to do some benefits mapping and realisation and supporting that whole benefit management piece, so we actually understand which projects and programs are actually going to deliver and contribute to strategy, how that, with a combination of the business as usual activity, drives us where the organisation needs to be in 3 to 5 years. It tends to be the highest escalation points for risks and issues, so anything that goes up through the escalation route will potentially end up in the portfolio office, where we're looking at what's the impact on us delivering the portfolio. And the program officers will and the centre of excellence will potentially determine some of that, how the reporting is done. But the portfolio office will look at that consolidated portfolio reporting and have the portfolio dashboard. And again, this is where the portfolio analyst comes into their own. They understand all of the information and the details that sit beneath that, but will present to the senior team. Those you go back to the definition of a dashboard, allows them to see where their focus of attention needs to be and the hotspots around those projects and programs. And again, at a portfolio level, you're doing a level of assurance and review, but it will not necessarily be down at the individual projects, have we finished particular tasks, are we at the point of this particular stage gate. It's really going to be looking at that the big ticket projects and programs. Are they going to still be delivering the benefits? Are there any major blockers that are going to stop us delivering our strategy? So a couple of the key challenges that we picked out from a portfolio management office, particularly where you've grown up from a program office into that portfolio office, it's sometimes very difficult to maintain the focus at the portfolio level and not get drawn down into program and project level. And particularly if you've got project and program officers embedded within your portfolio office, you need to make sure that you have sufficient time and resource to undertake those portfolio level activities. And this is the final bullet point, which I've also mentioned, but I'll also talk about in the example that I'm going to give, which is about this gaining credibility to actually provide advice to the senior team. If you've been presenting information to the senior team and you say, well, actually, I'll go and ask the project manager this, or I'll have to go and ask the program manager this, or I well, I don't know the details about that. If you don't have an understanding of what's happening across the piece, it gets very difficult for them to say, well, actually, we'll just go and ask the program manager, or we'll just go and ask the project manager. So keeping that oversight and the interplay between the projects and programs, and particularly understanding the impact they're having on the business, is really important. I'm just going to give you a quick example. When I worked for Gear UK, which is the parent company of Lloyd's Pharmacy, we started off as an IT program office, very much where Simon is currently working. We were delivering, we got to grips with the projects and programs that were being undertaken in the business, in the IT department. And there was a real challenge from the business to say, well, well, it's all well and good, Eileen, you coming and telling us that you're doing all of these projects and programs really well, but actually we're not kind of convinced that we're actually spending our time doing the right things. So it really kind of changed the whole focus of my role as a PMO manager at the time, because I then had the team kind of pick up the program office activities supporting the project and program managers, and I spent much more of my time working with the senior management with IT, and so we could kind of go back to the general board and say, well, actually this is where we're spending our time on the IT projects, making sure that we had alignment. So again, pulling together the pipeline, so the business would say we've got lots of projects that we want to undertake. We would work with them and say, well, what is the support you need from the IT department? What does that look like in terms of projects and pieces of work for the IT department? Have we got the right capacity and people in the right areas to do that? And how do we actually kind of manage the workflow across the IT organisation? So bear in mind we have to balance off the projects and programs that we're doing along with the business as usual activities within the IT department. So it completely changed the focus of what we were doing, but I'd had to spend quite a bit of time in the business first off just to get my head round, kind of delivery, to make sure that actually we were delivering projects well before we could start talking about, actually let's talk about which projects we're delivering to make sure that they go to the organisation and add value across the piece. So that's a very kind of specific example of where we were dragged quite literally from being a program office into a portfolio office. So there we are, that's our presentation as we'd anticipated delivering it. In terms of just picking up some of the questions that have been picked up, some interesting observations as well as people have been put there, rather than calling this Centre of Excellence, actually calling it a Centre of Expertise. And again, as I mentioned to Simon when he was delivering off the session around the Centre of Excellence or the Centre of Expertise, that works well as long as what you've got there is truly expertise, and what you haven't got is a bunch of junior people who are learning those systems and processes, because you can do yourself a great disservice. Did you pick up any other questions, Simon, that we can just cover off in our last few moments?
Yes, the last one that came in from Damien. It says, have you seen many instances where a portfolio office exists on its own with no project or program offices, and is there any reason why this wouldn't be viable?
I think in a number of organisations I've worked in, we've had a strategy and planning department, or a kind of a business planning department, who are there, who do that kind of portfolio analysis, what's happening in the business, what do we need to do, what do we need to deliver. And the interesting bit is they very rarely actually saw themselves as part of the old P3O setup. So we talked about the P3O setup as our kind of a whole map of project and program offices that sit through the organisation. And so they did the work with the senior team and supported them in terms of the pipeline and picking the right projects and programs. But because they didn't have a direct link down to a kind of a program office, or those kind of program, or kind of even some of the oversight portfolio office activities of actually kind of supporting the delivery and kind of escalating those questions, it tended to be kind of they used to decide what projects needed to be delivered and then kind of throw it down to the delivery team, and then kind of the delivery team would do all of the work and activity, which proved that, and often what happens is there'd be kind of some kind of spending review or the kind of the budgets, and from the top down we'd get this kind of the business planning office, right, and we need to kind of cut some money, but there wasn't that holistic view in terms of, well, what's the impact of that, and how do we kind of square the circle to make it all actually work, because there are potentially kind of questions that are going to go up and down that until we get to a revised portfolio that the delivery team are happy to deliver that matches with what's in flight. So I think it has been in the past. I think there is more recognition today that actually that's a link to the top end kind of program officers and how that filters down into the temporary project and program officers in the organisation.
Yes, I mean, personally, I think that if you've still got a separate planning department, that probably you should be thinking about morphing it to be a portfolio management office and absorbing that expertise. because I think that would be more rounded and more useful to the business.
If you do want to get in touch, this is how you can contact us, as well as on the APM website. We're also on Twitter and LinkedIn. Feel free to kind of follow up the conversations then. Thank you very much for your time.